It was pretty windy.
Yeah, and there's lots of shacks, tin shacks, so they're pretty noisy.
And then the ruffling against our tent and the waves, everything was just bashing, and it was so windy and so noisy.
Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. In this episode, Cleo Smith reveals, so the little girl who was actually taken, she reveals what the abductor told her that made her go with him. Now, we tend to imagine dramatic abductions involving sedatives, sick fantasies, and serious harm, permanent harm. Children in stranger abduction scenarios are typically killed within the first 3 to 6 hours of being taken. That's actually mentioned in the 60 Minutes Australia documentary, and I'll put a link to that in the description. But this one seemed to have none of those things. In the place of a sedative, Terence Kelly simply told Cleo a believable lie, and we'll get to that in a moment. Kelly did have fantasies, but they seem more silly than sick. Certainly not the overt sexual fodder the true crime community tend to regularly associate with these sorts of crimes. Although Cleo has suffered from real and serious trauma, it's a lot less damaging and destructive than we're used to seeing. What is so valuable in this ultra-rare case of a child recovered, virtually safe and sound, is that she's been able to give an account of how she was taken and why she went with him willingly. Before we get to that, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. Like, share, leave a comment, and let's get started. So I'm going to clarify a few details that have come through. Obviously, this is with the benefit of hindsight. Obviously, because everything is over and Cleo is now back home safe and sound, the police have been willing to release some information. Obviously, also, the case isn't quite complete. It's still got to be heard at trial, and so there's probably even more information that's still got to come out, but we've certainly found out a few more details that have been clarified. So I'm going to take you through 7 things that have really stood out to me. So first of all, the tent. It's now clear that there was a zipper on 2 opposite sides of the tent. First of all, there was a zipper on the side Ellie and stepdad Jake were sleeping in, and then also another zipper on the side that Cleo and her little baby sister were sleeping in. Cleo was also sleeping on the outside of her side. In other words, she was right by the zipper. The way I imagined it, I'm not sure how you imagined it, but the way I imagined it was that the zipper was kind of in the middle, and that there was only one sort of main zipper, only one real entrance to the tent. Because, of course, we were never really shown the tent itself up close. And this would have made it, certainly in my mind, very unlikely that a stranger would brazenly approach the tent and was it even possible to remove someone under these circumstances without being seen or heard? I mean, you've got to think about it almost like you are in a bedroom with 3 other people, right? You are with your spouse and 2 children in a bed, but it's a very, very small bedroom, and the walls are made of paper. And so someone's actually going to enter that bedroom, take someone out of it, and no one's going to know any better. That is actually the exact scenario that is presented to me not very credibly in the Nora Corrin case. In any event, it did seem very likely that that would happen. But of course, if you have a scenario where the exterior doors are right by the child's bed, then that makes it a little bit different. Even so, how hard is it to hear a tent zipper being pulled when you're right there? And I think Ellie at one point speculates that perhaps the zipper was pulled down very, very slowly. Interestingly, the 60 Minutes documentary revealed that both zippers were actually touched. That brings us to the second point, noise buffer. In the interview with 60 Minutes, Ellie and Jake both confirmed that on the night of the incident, which is Friday the 15th of October last year, it was exceptionally windy. I played that for you in the clip right at the beginning of this episode. And what that means is that it was also noisy. it was Ellie that mentioned the ruffling of the tents in the wind. Just think about that sound. So the tents were flapping, shacks were creaking, the sea was roaring, and whenever the blowholes erupted, the roar provided a potential noise buffer to the sound of the zip being drawn down. If the noise buffered the sound of a zipper, it didn't drown out the sound of a car screeching away at, I think, 3 a.m., and this was heard by one of the campers. There was also another witness report of a car turning off Blowholes Road and heading towards Carnarvon just before 3:30. So both those witness accounts hold hands, the timing of it. These witness reports turned out to be absolutely crucial. Now think about if you didn't have them. If you didn't have these reports of somebody leaving the campsite, well, then that would mean if no one left the campsite, then it would have meant that Cleo still had to be there as well. And that again would put suspicion where. And that brings us to something that we found out that wasn't revealed until now, and that is a footprint. The cops were convinced all along that a stranger was involved, but this was due to something they never shared with the public. A dusty footprint was found inside the tent, obviously on Cleo's side, along with DNA. Now think about a scenario where the child is in a tent, in a sleeping bag. If you're going to pick her up out of there, it's going to be very difficult to be standing outside the tent to do that, just because of center of gravity. And bear in mind, the canvas bottom of a tent is made of a plasticky material, and so a bare foot stepping onto it might be similar to a fingerprint left on a glass. You might have quite a lot of that footprint remaining behind. You might have the size of it, especially if there's fine dust, then the foot standing on that plasticky surface, especially if it's a somewhat sweaty foot, might leave a clear clue about the size of the foot and also even possibly DNA. So that brings us to the fourth point. He didn't know what side of the tent she was on. And I find this very interesting because it puts us into the psychology of the abductor. So for me, the biggest insight was seeing the abduction from the point of view of the abductor. It's easy to assume he'd been spying all along and that watching, he obviously knew where Cleo was. But the fact that he pulled both zippers down means he didn't know where she was. He didn't know where she was, but he did know a little girl was inside the tent. How? Well, because of this. The little girl's pink bicycle. Now, think about the psychology of Terence Kelly. This is a guy obsessed with dolls, and this little bicycle, this little girl's toy, bright pink, is a match for a lot of the packaging and accoutrements for girls' toys and dolls' toys. Number 5, the hypocrisy of the news media. Ellie and Jake were paid $2 million in Australian dollars for their exclusive interview. There was actually a bidding war with 7 News, and Channel 9 apparently snatched it away. So you then have a documentary showing the parents talking about the incident as well as footage of the child that was taken. And then this is broadcast nationwide. If you were really that concerned about Cleo, including Cleo's safety going forward, you really wouldn't do that. And you wouldn't put you wouldn't put much of your children on social media going forward, let alone on national news. You would think that would be the lesson in this. In other words, having greater vigilance over your child, but not just that. Greater protection, greater security, including in the social media sense. I myself, I don't fault Ellie and Jake for taking the $2 million. I say good for them, and at least that money can help the family going forward. It can pay for good schools and university, and it just improve the whole lifestyle and improve the situation that they're in for a good home life. But I feel differently about the money paid to the McCanns for the ongoing search for Madeleine, or the so-called search for Madeleine. I don't know if you guys are aware, the McCanns have just received another boost of £1 million in the search for Madeleine. Number 6, why did Cleo not call out when she was taken or afterwards? Again, what is so valuable in this ultra-rare case of a child actually recovered, virtually safe and sound, is that she's been able to give an account of how she was taken and why she went with him willingly. She was told, in other words, he told her that her little sister was sick and that her parents needed to take her to hospital and look after her. No dramatic sedative used, a simple, somewhat credible lie. But again, a stranger taking Cleo, one would imagine she'd have quickly cried out. Even knowing what we know happened, it's hard to imagine Cleo not crying out. Sometimes there are simple explanations we simply don't expect. And then the final point, hypocrisy of true crime channels. I got this comment and I just want to read it out to you. Someone wrote, quote, I find it rather disgusting that all of the people who so instantly blamed Cleo's mom and stepdad simply crawled back into their pit after sweet little Cleo was found and returned home. This young and loving couple were put through pure hell, and the online demons made everything so much worse for them. I saw this comment and it probably resonates with many. I know I was accused of blaming the parents as well. In fact, I thought Jake seemed suspicious in both interviews he gave originally, and even watching him in the 60 Minutes footage, he still comes across as odd, nervous and uncomfortable. Ellie comes across very open and transparent and in touch with her emotions, perhaps even very light-hearted given the circumstances. But even with the benefit of hindsight, Jake still pings the radar. Some people are just uncomfortable in front of the camera. But I don't think you can ever ask an investigator to ignore his intuitions. Oh, that guy's behaving strangely. Oh, forget about that. Just don't even think in that direction. What happens in true crime is you notice something and you take notes and you see if those intuitions go anywhere. They usually do. They often do. But in this case, they didn't. Just recently, we had a similar case in the Charlize Mutton case, also in Australia, where there was every reason to believe the stepdad was responsible, and it turned out that he was. While I understand that there's a perception of instantly blaming the parents, and some channels do this kind of with impunity in a very speculative, unbalanced way, it's also important to bear in mind that True Crime Rocket Science doesn't have an agenda. True Crime Rocket Science is aware of the intertextualities, aware of the statistics, and if the facts and circumstances seem to show the parents are innocent, then the coverage will reflect that, and over time that will be more and more explicit. But if the circumstances don't seem to show a lack of culpability from the parents, think of the Summer Wells case, then over time that too will become more and more obvious. So in this situation, we had a very strange scenario with the tent and so on. But the reality is, what we do is we follow the evidence wherever it leads. And in this case, it was extremely unlikely that someone wouldn't have heard the zipper pulled. So on the one hand, you could say maybe someone would have pulled down the zipper, okay, but wouldn't someone have heard the zipper? There were 4 people in that tent. Wouldn't one of the 4 have heard something? And the other critical evidence that was withheld from the public initially was, the thing about the footprint. So perhaps they hoped that the abductor might come forward by not revealing what they knew. Perhaps they didn't want to scare him off by revealing what they knew too soon. And that they probably knew or had some idea of who this person was. So the abductor might have the opportunity to turn Cleo in or let her go, and he could still get away with his crime, believing that they didn't really know who he was. A true crime channel can only work with what they know, and if the authorities don't reveal some of the details they know, it's only natural that you will investigate possibilities based on what you do know. It's not a vendetta, it's not a conspiracy, and it's not personal. It's taking all of what we know and saying, what does it look like is happening here? And that's what we do with every case. We let the evidence guide us. In conclusion, the Cleo Smith case is a rare and exceptional case. It's rare and exceptional and good to have a heartwarming ending like this. This feels like the inversion to the Gabby Petito case. In this case, you see a little girl come back to life, alive and happy, and with her whole life still ahead of her. It's good to see. It's good to see, especially in times like these. Although the perpetrator has been described as a monster, we're lucky that he was, I won't say harmless, because he did do a lot of harm, but he was a lot less harmful and monstrous than many of the perpetrators out there. That was perhaps the most surprising aspect of all, and I dare say that caught everyone by surprise. So I'm not going to take it further than that. There will be a members-only episode tomorrow, that's Wednesday, at around 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's very late for me. That's 11 o'clock at night. So I'm going to try not to make it longer than an hour, hour and a half, but that'll be members only. You'll find a link in the description to become a member in order to participate in that discussion. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.